In the winter of 1692, Salem did not begin with fire or gallows. It began inside one house with 2 girls, a minister's family, and a question nobody in the village could answer. Before this series is over, we will follow that question all the way through Salem. But first, we need to watch the first week when fear stopped being private and became official. Snow sat on the roofs of Salem Village. Fences were buried. Bare trees scratched at a grey sky. Inside Reverend Samuel Parris's parsonage, his daughter Betty Parris and niece Abigail Williams began to behave in ways that frightened the household. Witnesses described strange fits, cries, contortions, and moments that looked beyond ordinary sickness. In a Puritan village that did not feel like a medical puzzle, it felt like a warning. And because the trouble lived in the minister's own home, everyone watched. A private family crisis was already becoming public. The question was simple. What could cause children to suffer like this in a godly house? The answer Salem reached would change everything. By February, neighbors were coming in and out of the parsonage. Ministers listened, family members worried. A local doctor, traditionally identified as William Griggs, reportedly decided the girl's condition had no ordinary physical cause. That conclusion mattered. In modern language, it sounds vague. In Salem, it sounded explosive. If the cause was not natural, many people believed it might be supernatural. And in a place where the devil was treated as a real force in daily life, witchcraft was not folklore. It was a legal and religious threat. The room had shifted. This was no longer a sickbed. It was a battlefield nobody could see. Then came the first names. On 29th of February 1692, formal complaints were made against Tituba, Sarah Good, and Sarah Osborne. That choice tells us a lot about Salem. These were not the most powerful women in the village. Tituba was an enslaved woman in the Parris household. Sarah Good was poor, often begging, and easy to cast as troublesome. Sarah Osborne had a damaged reputation and had broken social expectations. In moments of fear, communities often look first toward the edges, toward the people with the least protection. Salem did exactly that. But once accusation had a name attached to it, the danger changed shape. Fear was no longer floating through gossip and prayer. It now pointed at living bodies. And those bodies would be brought into public view. Why did Salem accuse its own neighbors? And why these neighbors first? Part of the answer is fear, part is status, and part may be older resentment waiting for a chance to speak. Salem Village was already divided before the girls fell ill. There were arguments over Reverend Parris, arguments over taxes, arguments over church membership, landlines, and who held authority in the village. Salem Village also lived in the shadow of Salem town, close enough to trade with it, uneasy enough to resent it. Families lined up in factions. Some historians argue those feuds shaped the first wave of accusations. Others warn us not to flatten everything into politics because the people involved often seem to have believed deeply in witchcraft itself. Both things can be true at once. A frightened community does not stop being political, and a political community does not stop being afraid. By the end of February, Salem had all the ingredients for blame: religious fear, personal grievance, and a few vulnerable targets standing in plain sight. The only thing missing was a courtroom. That arrived almost immediately. On the 1st March 1692, magistrates Jonathan Corwin and John Hathorne examined the 3 accused. Picture the room: cold timber walls, candles, benches crowded with villagers. The accused standing under watch while questions came hard and fast. Sarah Good denied witchcraft. Sarah Osborne denied it too. Tituba's path was different. Under pressure, she confessed. That split response became one of the most important moments in the entire Salem story. To the magistrates, denial did not clear a suspect. It could look like concealment, but confession looked like proof that the devil was active in the village. Salem's authorities were not simply collecting facts. They were interpreting behavior through a religious lens that already expected hidden evil. A cry, a refusal, a contradiction, a frightened answer, all of it could be folded into the same story. Once the examination began, private suspicion passed into public ritual. Questions were asked before witnesses. Answers were repeated. Records were written. This is why the first week mattered so much. Law and religion had joined hands. What a household feared in whispers could now move through warrants, testimony, and official belief. The village had given shape to panic, and Tituba's words were about to make it much larger. Tituba's confession was a turning point because it offered Salem something more powerful than a single culprit. It offered a plot. She described the devil's work in Salem and pointed toward a wider conspiracy. Instead of one unexplained illness in one minister's home, the village now faced the idea of an invisible network. That idea had enormous force in a Puritan mind. If witches were acting together, then danger could be anywhere. In a cellar, at a bedside, in the pew beside you. Historians still debate how to read Tituba's confession. Was it coerced? Was it a survival strategy? Was she shaping her answers to what authorities wanted to hear? We cannot know every motive with confidence. What we can say is that confession rewarded the court's expectations in a way denial did not. It gave magistrates a story that made the chaos legible. And once a story explains fear, people cling to it. Tituba did not calm Salem. Her words widened the map of suspicion. Now the village was not looking at 3 women. It was looking for hidden allies, secret signatures, and neighbors who might have already joined the devil without anyone noticing. Then we reached the hardest question in Salem. What was really happening to Betty Paris and Abigail Williams? Modern writers have proposed several answers. Psychological stress, social pressure, deliberate performance, trauma, a medical cause, group contagion. Even now, no single theory has been proven. That uncertainty matters, because Salem was built not just on what happened, but on how people interpreted what happened. The villagers did not have modern psychiatry. They did not have neurology. They had scripture, local custom, fear of the devil, and a court ready to listen. Even the famous story of a so-called witch cake, often placed in late February, shows how desperate and confused the moment was. People mixed folk remedies with strict religion while trying to fight what they thought they could not see. Salem was not rational one minute and irrational the next. It was a community reaching for explanations with the tools it had. Some explanations came from belief. Some came from pressure. Some may have come from people trying to survive accusations that had already started rolling downhill. But once the girl's suffering was accepted as evidence of witchcraft, every later event became easier to justify. That was the trap. The symptoms came first. The meaning attached to them changed the colony. Salem Village was not living in calm times. The colony had just come through political upheaval after the Glorious Revolution and the collapse of the old dominion of New England government. Many New Englanders also lived with the memory and fear of frontier violence, including attacks linked to war with Native American and French forces. Historians often point to this wider atmosphere when they ask why Salem was ready to believe in hidden enemies. The exact weight of that fear is debated. We should be careful here. Not every villager thought the same way, and Salem's local quarrels still matter. But broad instability can sharpen local panic. When the world feels unsafe, people may become more willing to see threat in the invisible, the unfamiliar, or the already disliked. In Salem, that larger anxiety met a divided village and a dramatic set of accusations. The result was explosive. By March, the panic was already moving past the first 3 suspects. Once more names entered the frame. Salem crossed a terrible line. If the devil could work through the poor, the marginal, and the outsider, he could also work through church members, property holders, even people with standing. No household was fully safe now. The accusations had escaped their first targets. That is why the first week changed everything. Not because Salem suddenly discovered fear, but because fear found a system. In January and February, distress lived in a household. By the first days of March, it had become a public process with names, complaints, examinations, confession, and records. Once that happened, private dread gained official force. A village rumour could become a sworn statement. A frightened child could help launch a prosecution. A confession, especially one shaped under pressure, could invite more arrests rather than end them. Salem did not begin as a machine. It became one step by step, and those steps were taken fast. First, unexplained suffering. Then, a diagnosis beyond nature. Then vulnerable suspects. Then magistrates. Then a confession that suggested many more witches were hiding in the village. In just days, Salem built the logic that would carry the trials forward. In the episodes ahead, that logic will spread far beyond the Paris house, swallowing people who looked far safer than the first accused. Because once a community believes evil is moving unseen through familiar homes, every grudge, every odd behavior, and every frightened word can start to look like evidence. And Salem was only getting started.